Well, we're live. This is the three amigos. We came, we saw, we stayed, and we're a little bit late tonight. We apologize for that. Um, I know I had a couple of friends contact me by email and saying, "Where are you? We're looking for you live." So if you're still there, we'll give a shout out to a couple of three people that were waiting for us. Um, the whole idea behind this we came, we saw, we stayed was to share our experiences of moving to and living in Russia, especially Yalta in the Crimea. Now, I put together a list of about 50 things, topics that we're going to cover on this show. This is show really number one. And we started out at lunch today, as we usually do every couple of weeks on Wednesday. And we talk about all matter of things, politics, life in Russia, what's going on. The big story, obviously, that everybody is talking about is President Putin's visit to China and how he has been received, and everything that has been accomplished. Some 40 agreements were signed, several public statements about friendship. We're in this together. We're working towards a multipolar world. We don't want to have a hegemon in the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll probably talk a little bit about that and compare Putin's trip to Russia and Trump's trip last week that seemed to be a show of force that ended up being a bust. Mm-hmm. But first of all, Richard Dillman, Peter Freuwein, let's start tonight sharing our own views about some of the things that we found really important to observe. Let's start with some social expectations. Now, one of the things that Americans, and I think all Americans that come here, when they get here, life is a bit different. The customs are a bit different. Mm-hmm. Americans will find so many things in common. People that look just like them, act just like them. Whether you're in Moscow, St. Petersburg, wherever you entered from, you're going to see people just like yourselves. But there's some customs in Russia that really have to be observed. Now, Richard, you came in through Siberia, and you lived in Siberia for a number of years. Were there any particular customs that you as an American had to get used to?
Well, things like you don't ever shake hands with somebody if you have gloves on. You have to take your gloves off. You have to remember things like that. Or, when you're entering between doors, you don't, coming into somebody's home, you don't shake their hand. You have to go through the door, things like that. Or you don't hug somebody between the doors, So some of that stuff. You do not whistle indoors. No whistling indoors. That's a no-no. Basically, or things like the difference in America is, if the milk goes bad in America, people would just go and throw the milk out. Where here they would make cheese out of it, or or butter or something, things like that. I've noticed, things like that. But if you're in a supermarket and you run your cart into somebody, you don't even have to say, "Oh, I'm very sorry." People, they wouldn't even flinch, unless you hurt somebody. But I mean, if you did that, accidentally, to them, that's normal. It's not like in America, you'd have to really watch it because you could get in an altercation over things like that. Or the same thing in holding the door open for people. Now here you can hold the door open for people, and some say, "Oh, but thank you." Other people will walk right through, but they don't. It's not a thing like, "Oh, it's not." If they say something to you, thank you. Okay. If not, it's just normal. Everything's normal here. I remember being in Siberia, and my neighbor, I told him yesterday, tomorrow it's going to be -40. He goes, normal. Everything's normal. So these people here, are hardened, their life, especially the older people like us, or, even in their 40s and 50s, they've seen some tough times. So now things are so much easier to them that they could, everything's, oh, wow, they don't really have much to complain about, and especially from the 1990s when they first broke away from the Soviet Union, broke apart. Things were really, really tough. I was friends with a guy I met. We used to walk our dogs. I'd meet him sometimes in the morning. We'd walk our dogs and stuff. And I got to talking to his parents. They were both policemen in Krasnaya for many years. And they were telling me it was so bad in the 90s when they, for many years, like I'm talking 5-6 years, that the police weren't even really paid in rubles. They were paid in vegetables. And that's no messing around. That was, things were really, so the way the situation is now, and since the year 2000, especially since President Putin came in, their lifestyle has drastically changed to, hundreds of percent, maybe 700% better than it was in the year 2000. So, yeah, that's what I've noticed, things like that.
Yeah. Well, you're right. In the last 26 years, quality of life has skyrocketed, really. And under Putin's administration, Russia was in the ashes, was finished. And they've really risen from the ashes like the phoenix bird. Peter, what are some of the things that you've noticed?
Oh, wow. Well, if you start when you enter a lot of people's homes, it's customary to take your shoes off, which I can't even remember ever doing that in a home in America. And it's actually, there's some people who don't mind, but there are a lot of people who ask you to. So if you do visit a Russian household, be ready to take your shoes off and maybe have some slippers or something bring with you to wear indoors. And it makes sense because it keeps the house much cleaner. Well, like I was saying at lunch today too, the feeling, although I wasn't born yet, the feeling I get about Russia today is Russia's like the 1950s in America. It's still very conservative, very traditional. Now there are some definitely differences. I'd never really had traveled in public transportation in the U.S. because most cities in the U.S. most people have their own cars, but here in public transportation, something's interesting. We have a local bus system here around Yalta, but the bus system also travels to other, cities here in Crimea. And one of the things I noticed, especially on some of these shorter trips, like 30, 45-minute trips, there will be too many people on the bus, and you think, oh, no, more people can't get on. Then you get to a bus stop, and more people get on. It's like, how is this possible? And I've literally been on a bus where I'm face-to-face with somebody I've never met, and it's just you're packed like this would never happen in the U.S. because I guess we treasure more, or not about treasure, but we don't get too close to each other. It's kind of this private space we all have, within a couple feet of each other. And then, another thing I've done too is at the grocery stores. I've had it happen more than once. I'll be in line and I'll have like 10 or 20 things. And usually, well, it's happened to both men and women. A man or a woman will come up and ask me, hey, can I cut in line? I mean, literally. And then some people will just walk around you and cut in line. And it's like, what? Okay. And normally I'll say yes. If I have the same number of things that someone else has, I'll say, hey, come on, really? I mean, you're in that much of a hurry that you can't wait for me to buy my one thing so you can buy your one thing. So I find that entertaining that I can't even remember a time where I was in a checkout line in the US where someone asked to hey, can I cut in line? It's just something that never happened. That's something I've had to get to. And I know I've mentioned this too, is I know with younger Russians, it's more normal that they are expressive in public. But older Russians are very still in public. A lot of them are very reserved in that they don't smile a lot, which is kind of, that caught me off guard. Like, it caught me off guard because I don't smile a lot, but I don't know. I'm not, when I'm out in public, I guess I do in some ways, I'm expressive or smile, where Russians are very, if you don't know them, they're typically very stoic. And then because we're Americans here, and it's very unusual to have Americans here in Crimea, anywhere, even here in Yalta. I mean, we all stand out. Well, I know I do, because I don't try to dress like a Russian. I just dress, normally like I would in the US. And I know immediately people look at me and they go, okay, sometimes they'll say they think I'm from England or
Germany.
Or Germany. But when we start speaking English in public, it's, heads turn, people look, it's like, oh wow, they're shocked. Now I've made a lot of friends here in Yalta, Russian friends, and some have some of their English is very, very good, and some is very limited. But there's a cafe I go to all the time that almost everyone there knows me, and a lot of them don't. Their English isn't very good, but I speak a little Russian, they speak a little English, and we're able to communicate. I'm able to order what I need to order. And then when it gets more complicated, I get my translator out. But
Yeah.
I found Russians are very, they're very giving and very thoughtful. I've mentioned this before, I think too, that like I'll drop something. Now, not all Russians are, there's some Russians that are pretty aggressive. It's not, you don't run into it often, but there's some Russians who are very, sometimes they drive aggressively, and that's not all Russians too. But normally,
I'll tell you what, I decided when I left the United States, I was not going to drive here because it is totally insane here in Yalta. You don't see hardly any accidents, but it's insane in Moscow. Anywhere I've gone, it's insane. It's just, they don't drive like we do in the States. But anyway, I just want to jump on that comment. It's like, no way am I going to ever drive here.
Well, I've heard that there are parents who their main residence in Moscow, and they want their kids to learn to drive in Yalta because they say if they can learn to drive in Yalta, they can drive anywhere. And I think that's true because Yalta, a lot of Yalta roads are very narrow, and some are extremely narrow. I mean, it's like, how do you even fit a car down this street? And then there's winding and uphills and downhills. And then, in the winter, sometimes we have snow or ice. Then it's like, oh man, don't stay off the road.
But one of the things we've all noticed here in Yalta, forget it in Moscow, maybe big cities, the drivers are very polite. And if you've noticed, they'll always let somebody come because the streets converge, and it's like one after another. They'll let them in. Somebody wants to make a left turn across traffic, they'll stop, they'll wave them, and I've never experienced anything like that. And in America, it's like, I'm going to get ahead. I'm going to cut you off. And that damn bus just pulled out in front of me. It's like, why did he do that? You know?
And it's very rare to hear people honk at other people. I mean, sometimes I'll hear it maybe once a week, a honk off in the distance. But like you said, they're very courteous, let merge and
but I think that's Yalta. I don't think that I haven't experienced that in Moscow. That's for sure. Yeah. So anyway, I want to comment on a couple of things that you guys talked about, and I took some notes here. The matter of shoes, Peter, as you mentioned, some Russians don't mind. They say, "Oh no, don't worry, leave your shoes on. It's okay." But we were late with our live stream tonight, and I guess I have to confess it was mostly my fault. We were out at an event, and it was a frolicking good time, and we were a little late getting out of there. And so I rushed home, and we came into the door, and I didn't even wait to take my shoes on. And let me tell you, I heard about it. So that was a good point. Okay, you take your shoes off, and if you're coming here for the first time, this should be part of your checklist. If you're going to visit anybody in Russia, you don't wait for them to tell you to leave your shoes on. You get your shoes off, and what most of them have, at least our friends and family, they will have slippers there, different sizes of slippers or Crocs or something for you to put on your feet. I usually don't put anything on. I just have my socks on, and that's perfectly fine. You mentioned crowds. The Russians are not like the British, who will queue up very orderly, waiting for the bus or waiting in line. And I've got a couple of experiences, even from today. Peter, you mentioned being on a bus. I try to avoid certain buses here.
50.
They're so crowded. They're packed in like sardines. You really are squished up against everybody. And in many cases, you don't even have to hold on, much less you can't reach something to hold on. You're moving like a school of fish or something. I don't know. It's, and like you said, in America, everybody's concerned about their space. You would never be brushing up against anybody.
Oh no.
And here it doesn't matter. It's an older person, it's a man or a woman, it's a kid, it's a young woman, it's a woman with a child. Doesn't make any difference. It really is a matter of, I think, safety. But I can't understand. I can never understand where you pull out up at a stop, and one of the stops we all know is very busy here. A number of people get off, but then more and more people get on. And you'll have old people who maybe with a cane or something, instead of waiting for another bus, they will crowd on. It doesn't stop. And then a bus driver sometime will be hollering at people to move to the back, back. Yeah. And it's all standing room only. And the buses here, the buses in Yalta don't have a lot of seating. Maybe they might be seating for 10, 15 people, 20 max. Everybody else stands. Anyway, this is something that if someone is going to visit anywhere in Russia, the public transportation is outstanding. It's excellent. Here in Yalta, if you're going to take public transportation, and it's very efficient, it's clean, but you can expect to be squashed in like sardines. Nothing you can do about it. You talked about waiting in lines. Guys, I had to go to the public clinic this morning to have blood taken. I'm starting a series of doctor visits to do kind of like an annual physical. And we got there. It was a little after 8 o'clock. They opened the doors at 7:30. And they have two women in this room who draw blood, one on one side, one on the other. So you get two in there at a time. I was behind about 20 people.
Wow.
And I went, oh my God, this is going to take forever. I hadn't done this here yet. And so I was there with my wife, and she said, well, I'll stand in line. You go further up, there's some seating, and sit, and I'll call you when we get there. And then she got out of line. She had to take a phone call. And I'm sitting there, and I'm nervous, and I'm saying, oh, God, why did you get out of line? Now you're going to have to go to the end.
Oh.
I've had this happen in an airport where, you have a queue of people going up, and all of a sudden somebody comes and cuts in front, the third or fourth person, and nobody says anything. It's, well, they were there first. They said, oh, I'm going to leave. I got to go get something. And they come back.
Yeah.
And this is what happened this morning. And I'm looking at my wife and I'm saying, oh, please don't get out of line. People are cutting in front of you. And, we're never going to get out of this place. Well, you know what? She answered the telephone. She moved away. And she came back. She got in line. And then she decided to sit down next to me. And I'm going, oh, geez, someone else is going to get, Everybody knew the pecking order.
Yeah, they do.
But what happened this morning, I've never seen happen before. It was two people ahead of me. I was going to be like the third or the fourth one going in. This one guy, he was, I don't know who he was, a little short guy, short white hair, and maybe he was like 50 or 60. Okay. He walked up, cut right in front of this little old babushka, little old grandmother who was next. The door opened. This one person came out and he went in. All hell broke loose. These old women screaming at him. And he closed the door, but this one woman opened the door and they're hollering into the room. It was comical. They're hollering into the room to tell the nurses, this guy cut in.
Good for that.
Oh, yeah, you don't do that.
Yeah, I've never seen that. People usually are very polite, but this guy, he was really very arrogant. And when he came out, he was hollering at everybody, and then he finally went to the end of the line. Anyway, that's my story from today about, waiting in line. And,
I love it.
It's, now I want to mention something else. I was told when I first came to Russia, as an American, basically keep your mouth shut if you're out in public. And if you're going to talk, you talk very softly. If you're on a bus or you're on a train, it's the same thing. They know we're foreigners. Most of them will guess, as you mentioned, we're either German, English, or because they hear the English, or American. I mean, I've never been able to pass for a Russian. Now, although some people will come up and speak Russian to you, they just don't know. But anyway, I think it's really important for Americans who come here to either be quiet on public transportation or to speak very softly. I get reminded of it like all the time. Now, I want to say something else, and you guys may want to comment on this. I never felt safe anywhere I lived in the United States. I lived in Arizona for 34 years. There was a lot of drug dealing. There were a lot of gangs. There were a lot of drive-by shootings. Over the 30 years that I was there, it became this way. But in the beginning, it was still, you would always lock your car. You'd never leave it unlocked. And you always locked your door. and most of us had gates. When you came home, you pushed the button, the garage door opened, you drove in, put it down.
Yeah.
Well, in Russia, you don't have to worry about somebody stealing something. We've had it happen. You might leave your phone somewhere. It's happened.
Yeah.
You go, oh my God, someone is going to steal my phone. Someone will hand it into either a bus driver, or if you're at a restaurant or wherever, they won't steal it, they'll leave it. The same thing with a credit card. I mean, it is, people here are so honest that if you do lose something and you can remember where it was, you backtrack, it'll be there. I'm sure we've all experienced that same kind of thing. But in terms of safety, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, and then we'll go back to Richard and Peter. You can comment on anything we've said here, add something, or go on to something else. But I could not believe it the first time I came here in 2016 to Moscow. There were young people, young girls alone, young women alone at 11, 12 o'clock midnight on the street, going on the metro, unafraid. And then here in Yalta, if you're going to wait for a bus and the kids are out of school, you will see 8 and 10-year-old girls and boys alone getting on a bus, going home or going to school. And parents, we see it here in Yalta because there's so many areas in Yalta, well, there's a few areas where it's pedestrian traffic only. And you see a kid on a little scooter or a skateboard, a little skateboard. A kid might be 5, 6 years old, goes zooming down this one lane, and you go, where's the parents? When my kids were growing up and they were that age, you'd never let them out of your sight. And here, there's absolutely no fear that someone is going to kidnap your kid or molest your kid or anything like that. Anyway, those are my comments. Richard, you want to pick up on any of that, or you want to go to something else?
I think kind of talking about trust and stuff. I just want to kind of run by, we just had here the May Day holiday. It goes from May 1st to May 10th. And that's a really big holiday here. And what it does, besides the big veterans thing on May 9th, it allows the Russian people to open up their dachas, summer homes, and also ogorod. Ogorod is the vegetable garden. A vegetable garden is a really big thing here. Now, I can't speak for Yalta and the Crimea area, but when I was in Krasnoyarsk, I was really impressed because even if you're a poor person in Krasnoyarsk and you don't have you're renting an apartment, but you don't have a dacha, they will give you a plot of land on like a bus, on the bus routes for anybody that wants to plant a garden. And like my wife's sister, she'd hop on the bus and she'd go to her garden, and the garden plots were beautiful. They'd be all set up, and really well done. And even if the people were poor and didn't have money for seeds, the government would give them, or somebody would give them seeds. They'd have seed swapping things there, like groups where people swap seeds and stuff. And nobody ever messed with anybody's garden. I was so amazed that, you could hop on your bus and for 20 rubles at the time, or 25 rubles, whatever, and go out and go to your garden and tend your garden. And I was just overwhelmed at that and the trust and that. And I just want to mention that. I was really impressed by that.
Yeah, I think we've all probably noticed that. And Richard, Peter, you can comment it too. I think a lot of that goes back to the Soviet era, where people took care of each other, and there was a sense of responsibility to the commons. Back then, everything was common. And even today, like in our little neighborhood, all of these apartments were probably built somewhere during the Khrushchev era, and there's parks everywhere, and people even have gardens here. But in the fall, when the leaves are falling from the trees, right out our window, there's always these two old women. They're bent over. They've got to be, I mean, come on, they've got to be in their 80s, and they are raking the leaves. And then sometimes there'll be one of the old guys from the apartment that will go out and help them put the leaves in a sack and haul it to the street so that the city can come by and haul it away. In our apartment building, it's a 5-story building. We're on the 3rd floor. A little old babushka will come every once in a while, not only sweep, but wash the steps. And it's just the sense of responsibility to each other and to the commons. And one of the things is cigarettes. A lot of people here smoke cigarettes, which really surprised me when I first came. There were many Russians, and now many of them are vaping. And I guess the only good thing about vaping, there's no cigarette butts that somebody can throw. But I was out one time with my wife, and we were waiting for a bus. And this one guy came, and he was smoking a cigarette, and he stuck it into the wall. You know, the walls here are rocks. They were made with stones that, you know, masons made this. And she went after this guy like it was unbelievable. She said, "What, do you live here? Do you live in this neighborhood? What are you doing sticking your cigarette butt in a wall?" And so I just wanted to jump on that, because I think we probably all had a similar experience to that, how people really are very conscious about where they live and where they travel. It's very clean in most places here in Yalta. If you go to Moscow, I think Moscow, not only is it one of the most incredible cities in the world, arguably the most beautiful, spotlessly clean. It's clean day and night. So anyway, Peter, do you want to jump in? Richard shared that about the gardens and the doctors and the holiday, but where do you want to go with that?
Talking about, the lack of crime is, there's a cafe that I frequent, and I see all the time there's an upstairs, and then there's a downstairs, and the downstairs in the cafe, it's actually underground, is where the bathroom is. So there's a lot of times people will just get up from where they're sitting, and they'll leave everything. They'll leave their purse, they'll leave their phone, they'll leave their computer on the table. They might be there might not be anyone else with them. I do the same thing. I'll leave my laptop or my iPad or iPhone in my bag that I carry, just on the table or right next to the table, and it's perfectly fine. You just know that when you come back, it's going to be there. No one's going to mess with it. No one's going to touch it. It won't be gone. I don't think there's any restaurant in the U.S. where I would even consider doing that, even in the so-called safest neighborhoods. I was thinking too about, in fact, I made this comment today about one of the things I really like about Russia and Russians, especially here. I don't know about Moscow, but here in Yalta, and I know this is even when I lived in Alupka, I could see it there. There's wild cats, and actually there's more cats than dogs, but there's wild cats everywhere, and they're not feral, out of control. They're fairly tame, but a lot of Russians will carry cat food or dog food with them, and they'll feed the cats or the dogs. And they're very, a lot of the cats, because of that, are very friendly, and the dogs are too. They're very. You can almost they're, and you can tell the cats are not, that I know, aren't. There's no type of tagging on the cats that I know of, but on the dogs, they do have tags on the wild dogs. And the dogs, when I say wild, they're not, they don't have a home, but you can tell they're well fed, they're well taken care of. And I'll stop and pet them, both cats and dogs. It's funny too, when you see a cat in the U.S. where, I know it's, when we call a cat, we'll say, kitty, 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 something like that, or a variant of that in the U.S. Well, here it's funny. It's kind of it's not a hissing, but it's kind of like a hissing sound. But it's cats immediately, they know when you're doing that, they want to come to you, because normally I think people who do that, who make that sound, are wanting to feed them. But it really tells you a lot about a culture that treats, something as simple as wild dogs and cats with a lot of love and respect. And you see it everywhere. To me, it's very amazing, and it's very telling about Russians and their love for life, for all life, even dogs and cats.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I'm taking some notes here, so we can add it to our list of things maybe to come back to in the future. But I wouldn't call. Go ahead.
I'd like to just add to Peter what he was talking about, because when I came over here in 2014, I brought my dog with me from America, and I was just really worried that they would quarantine the dog, and the dog, I didn't know what the heck I was up against. I read about, but I got, I went through the whole thing and got him what they call a dog passport, and got them all the shots and everything. But I'd like to tell people that unless things have changed, do not be afraid to take your cat or dog to Russia. They absolutely love the dogs and cats. It was the easiest darn thing coming into Russia. I had no problem at all. No problem.
As long as you do what you did. You had them have all the shots. This is public. I mean, you can go online and figure if you're traveling with a cat or a dog, they get their own passport. You have no trouble once they see the documentation. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I've had a couple of friends that said, I'd love to come to Russia, but I'm not going to leave my cat or my dog. You don't have to. Yeah. Now, I want to comment on what Peter said. Now, I wouldn't call these cats wild, or the dogs, because, and they're certainly not like feral cats.
Yeah, no.
But here in Yalta, they're everywhere. And I think in Crimea also, from what I understand, but we'll only speak about Yalta now, people love cats. Now, we adopted a cat shortly after I moved here. This one cat, I think my wife fed it or petted it or something, and it followed her up, went right outside the door, and eventually, we took it in. And my idea was, this cat, I think, probably was domesticated and had been thrown away by somebody, or somebody died, and then the cat's on the street, because it was so tame. We brought it in the house. It was exceptionally clean. We never worried about it. We got a kitty box, a kitty litter thing, and it would use that, but most of the time it would go outside.
Yeah.
And right now we have a bit of a problem, because there's another stray cat, and probably a male, who is marking his territory, which is causing a problem in our apartment building. But to your point, Peter, about how people feed them,
Yeah.
there was a little old lady. She since died, but every day at the same time, uh, when you walk out of our apartment, across the street, there's trash bins, which they're in all the neighborhoods. And right opposite the trash bin, it's kind of a ledge. And this lady would come to this ledge, and then there's trees. There's a lot of trees everywhere around here. And
Yeah.
she would bring cat food. Sometimes she would bring smelt, little tiny fishes. And these cats knew they can tell time. They would be there.
Oh.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
They'd be there waiting for her. Sometimes there might have been 20 or more cats would come from all over the place.
Just out of the woodwork.
Our cat, we put a collar on our cat. It's kind of like a flea and tick collar, but it's a collar so people know that our cat's, not a stray. And this lady would spend, I don't know, half hour or more. She'd talk to the cats. She would put a little bit here, a little bit there, so they wouldn't fight. You understand? And I want to say almost everybody, and not just women, but I think a lot of the women do that, will feed the cats and the dogs. The other thing is you rarely see them fight. Like the dogs that are not domesticated, they are not harmful. They are not threatening at all. You find them sleeping. You're sleeping on the pavement all over the place, whether you're in town or in a neighborhood. And they could run over by a car or a truck, but nobody is going to do that. It's really incredible, Peter. I think you said it says something about a culture that respects cats and dogs, animals. Now, I want to say one more thing about dogs. Here in Yalta, and I've experienced it also in Moscow when we were there, but it's really common here. So many women are carrying these little Chihuahua things, and I don't call them dogs. These little things would have been dessert for my yellow lab. Back in the States. I mean, it was like, and they carry them like this woman got on the bus today, and it's she's carrying this dog. And the other thing about it is that people bring their dogs leashed and not on the leash. The ones that are not on the leash are extremely well behaved. They will not stray. They will follow their master wherever they go. But the thing that surprised me, restaurants, stores of all kinds will allow people to come in with a dog, carrying it or on a leash. And in restaurants, I'm sure there are some, if they're on the second, third, or top floor, the animals don't get up there, the stray ones. But I'm sure we've all been to restaurants where there'll be a cat in the restaurant, in the coffee shop. And they'll crawl under you, they'll rub against your leg, and they expect to be fed. And the restaurant has no problem with that. And I think this is something you would never see. I think maybe unless you're out in the far west in America, maybe in Arizona, out in a real rural area where you might have cats that would be there and people would feed them. But this is one thing that's really struck me here. And at first, I was really put off by it. I thought, come on, we don't do that in America. If you have a dog, it's on a leash, and you don't bring him into a restaurant or a store. You sure as hell don't bring him on public we don't have any public transportation, but we wouldn't do it. But after these years that I've been here, I've kind of gotten used to it. Anyway, that's my piece. Oh, one more thing, Peter. You talk about feeding cats and dogs. They feed pigeons. They feed the pigeons. There are people who will bring a bag of some kind of seeds or breadcrumbs that they've had. They throw nothing away. And they go and they feed, and you'll have 50 pigeons. It'll just all of a sudden come from nowhere. And again, some little old lady, or even kids. Kids love to feed the pigeons, and they chase them around. It's like, in the States, they would be poisoning these. In fact, I think they probably do in other places in Rome, in Moscow, because you don't see a lot of problems with pigeons crapping all over all the monuments there. But at least here where we live, cats, dogs, pigeons. And the other thing is, in America, the cats would be chasing the pigeons and the little sparrows. Here, they walk amongst each other. They don't even move.
Yeah.
All right, Peter, go ahead. It's your turn.
You know, in the winter, we even have ducks in some of the local streams. And what I would do is if I had a little, like a end of a bread loaf that, too small to eat, or the cafe that I go to, a lot of times they'll give bread, or people, I think it's funny. Sometimes people, when they're eating at the cafe, they'll have a little bowl of bread, but a lot of times they won't touch it. So I'll ask the people who work at the cafe, hey, can I have this bread? I want to go feed the ducks. So what I do, and the ducks are, I haven't seen the ducks lately. I think they migrate. In the winter, they're here. So during the winter, I'd go to there's a bridge over one of the streams here. I'd go stand in the bridge and just throw bread down. And the ducks, man, they just all like, oh, thank you. Just feeding the ducks. And
Peter, you talk about saving something like bread. Just this morning, I had to go have blood drawn because I'm starting an annual physical. And so you're not supposed to eat until the midnight the night before. And my wife and I went to a coffee shop very close to the clinic. And so I was kind of hungry. And I ordered like a wrap with chicken and lettuce and tomatoes. And there were two of them. They were, small, but two of them. Yeah. And there was a lot of mayo in it, much more mayonnaise than I really wanted. But anyway, I ate them. But when I got down to the bottom, there wasn't any stuff left in it. It was just this wrap with mayo. Yeah. And I didn't eat it. I left it in this little package. The same thing with the second one. And as we were getting ready to go, I was going to take and throw that stuff away. My wife said, no. Look, there's pigeons out there. I'm going to save these, take them outside. I'm going to feed it to the pigeons. Right. And I went, okay. That's the way it is.
Well fed.
That's the way it is. As you're saying, they don't throw anything away because you could feed the pigeons, you could feed the cats, you could feed the dogs, you could feed squirrels, anything they want to feed and take care of.
Oh, and to your point about restaurants too, and especially dogs, is the cafe that I most frequent. I don't think I've been in there one day without having at least somebody come in with their dog, either on a leash or not on a leash. And like you said, they're very well trained, very, very well behaved. Once in a while, you get a dog and another dog, and they kind of yap at each other, and then the owners will separate them. But that's very, very rare. It's most of the time it's the dogs are, and like you said, a lot of the dogs are not big dogs; they're small dogs, which is kind
little.
Yeah.
They would be dessert for my yellow labs.
Yeah, really. I've seen some here. It's like, is that a big rat or a small dog? I can't tell.
And these women will be having a purse, and the dog will be in the purse. You see the head in the purse.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Well, they'll carry them like children, and like you, I was on the bus today, and there was a woman that had a little chihuahua in her arms. He was just looking around. I said, "Hello, little doggy."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Richard. You got a comment?
Yeah, you talk about dogs. I remember this January we had some heavy ice for a couple of days over the January holidays here, and there's a dog that lives on the street. There's a couple of dogs that live on the street here, but when it was so bad there and it was so icy and cold, Wildberries crew there. They allowed the 2 dogs to come in there and live there all night long and everything, and fed them and everything. So I was really impressed with that. Yeah,
Well, my wife and I yesterday were in town, and we had to do some things, and I was getting some orthopedic insole things for my shoes because my feet have been killing me lately, and we went and we had this done. But on the way, we stopped at a coffee shop, and it's part of a chain that we have here in Crimea. And our regular cafe is kind of big. It can seat, I don't know, 20, 25 people. And they have a lot to sell: breakfast food, lunch food, cakes. They sell a lot of cakes, a lot of pastries. Anyway, we come into this one place, and it's really kind of small. And we were at one table. I think there were 2 tables, and we were at the larger one. And right behind me was a little cat box. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And this beautiful black cat came in right around your legs, underneath the table, and it went and it lay down right up against the counter. And my wife was talking to the lady, the barista, and she said, "Oh, you have this cat here, and there's a little cat box." And she says, "There's 3 or 4 coffee shops right here along this street." And she said, every single one of them has a little cat box, not a litter box, a little house, okay, a little tiny thing where they can crawl in and sleep. And she said, everybody feeds them every day on schedule. They go from one to the next to the next. And I thought, you can't tell me that these animals are not sentient. You can't tell me they don't understand time. You can't tell me they don't understand routine when it comes to food or anything else. And it's the same thing with the dogs. I mean, it's the same thing. And I just thought that was so. Now, when I first moved here, I couldn't conceive of that. You just would not have that in the States. But here, at least in Yalta, it's very common. Hey, we have a few minutes left. What I want to say to anybody who's watching this now, and to anybody who will watch it recorded, I mean, this is the first in a new series that we put together a list of some 50 things that people should know, Americans especially, should know about Russia. We are alike in so many ways, but there are certain customs and traditions and things that we're just not aware of in America. They're not things that we hold on to. So what our goal is to try to, in a very interesting format, like we've had today, is share some of our experiences, share some of the things we've learned, and I'll just kind of give an alphabetical overview from A to Z. Everything from, we're going to talk about getting a visa, how you get to Russia, what you need to do ahead of time, how bringing money to Russia. When you get here, what do you do? How do you do it? How do you reserve a hotel? If you're going to take public transportation, how you do that, when you should do that. We're going to talk about food. We're going to talk about wine. We're going to talk about all kinds of things that we're going to talk about language. Yeah. Do you have to be afraid of coming to Russia because you don't speak Russian? We're going to talk about things like that for 2 reasons. One, to dispel any fear that people who would like to come here, whether they're Americans or wherever they want to come, will dispel the fear. There's no reason to fear anything in Russia. And the second thing that we're trying to communicate is there's no reason to hate Russians. They're an incredibly peaceful, loving people.
Yeah.
And we've all experienced that. And so we're going to cover everything from A to Z that you would want to know if you're open and would like to try to understand Russia from the point of view of the three of us. Now, we have about 5 minutes left. We're coming up on an hour. I started out talking about the biggest story in the last 2 weeks has been not just Trump going to Russia. His reception was somewhat cold or icy.
To China. Going to China.
I'm sorry, to China.
Yeah.
The foreign minister of Iran went to China to meet with Xi. Very, very warm welcome. And then Putin, who's still there. He arrived yesterday for 2 days at night, 2 days of talks with Xi. And where Trump went home empty-handed with nothing, Putin and Xi have already signed some 40 agreements and made several public statements about their long-lasting friendship, how they're working together to reform the United Nations, the Security Council, and how they're striving to work towards a multipolar world and a world not dominated by the hegemon. Real quick, Peter, I'll come to you first. Your thoughts, briefly, because we can talk about this in another show in the future when things really become clear. What are your thoughts when you look at the three of these receptions all coming within the same month? And we've got a war going on in Iran, okay, that Russia and China are both heavily invested monetarily, militarily, the Belt and Road Initiative, etc. Peter, your thoughts?
Well, I know a defining year for both Russia and China was 2014. And that's when, there was this CIA-led coup up in Ukraine. And that's when Crimea said, hey, we don't want any part of this. We're going to be separate and ask to be part of Russia. And if you look at the behavior, then in 2014 is when the first sanctions were put on Russia because of Crimea. Now, what Russia did is like, okay, well, if you're going to play that game, then we're going to start to move away from you. And I believe 2014 was a key year also for China, because that was the year that I think both Russia and China started selling U.S. government bonds. It's like, okay, if the West is going to start playing this game. Now, I know right now Russia has no more U.S. government bond. Well, not zero, but it's pretty close to zero.
Almost none.
Yeah. Now, China has half. It had over, I don't know, it had like 1.2, 1.3 trillion at one point in U.S. bonds. Now it's, I think, around half that, 500, 600 billion. So they've literally cut their exposure to U.S. government debt by half. And what the West has done, the U.S. specifically, has literally pushed Russia and China together. So I believe I don't know what the Russia-China relationship was before then, but I believe that 2014 forward was our key years. And then even this, Russia having to do the special operation, China saw that and said, okay, we're going to, but it was even before that when they joined the BRICS. That was a key brilliant move by Russia and China as the leaders in that group to understand, okay, if the West is going to keep doing this nonsense, so then we're going to move away from it. But you could see that, like you said, when Trump showed up, it was very formal how China treated him. It was, I wouldn't call it friendly, but as opposed to when President Putin, it was like they were welcoming someone from their family.
Yeah,
I mean,
a love fest.
yeah, it was very intimate, and it's clear that Xi and President Putin are they're friends. They're good friends, and they have a great deal of respect for each other. Whereas I don't think China has any respect for Trump at all, and I don't think China trusts him. And I think that's wise because I don't trust Trump.
Yeah, right. All right, Richard, wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, what is America? Are they pushing the narrative on the American public that China's the big enemy and Russia's the big enemy?
Yeah.
We talked about this at lunch, but the people in the United States should understand for the last 30 years, they had sent over 70,000 corporations over to China, basically howling out the United States economy like a Thanksgiving done turkey, wasted. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you sent 70,000 corporations over to China, the United States Senate and Congress did that. The banking sector did that. The globalists did that. Actually, who's your real enemy in the United States? You know?
Yeah.
And the sanctions they put on China, especially on Russia, pushed them right together. Everything they've done it to themselves. They've done it to themselves. They can call them the enemy, but my God, the government of the United States and Israel for sure, and Britain, okay, the other ones, but they are the enemy. Those are the real cancer. I don't care what they say. China has been going around the world doing business with people, where the United States and Israel has been going around the world raping countries and doing just, you know, genocides and stealing and just, you know, becoming the most hated countries in the world. The United States and Israel are the most hated countries in the world by far. That's sad. I'm an American. I have relatives, I have grandsons over there, and I don't want to see that. But this is the fact. People got to wake up. They got to understand that, you know, you've got a cancer in your country that's been there, and you know you're going to have to get rid of that. The bloodline cancer.
We pretty much talked about our experiences of culture and customs that we've experienced. And at the end, we just touched a little bit on this geopolitical situation that's emerging. We will continue to talk about geopolitical things from the point of view of the three of us Americans living here. And, you know, we all believe that the perspective that the three of us have is very different than the common narrative coming out of the United States. And I don't just mean the mainstream media, coming out of all the analysts and all the bloggers who don't live here and who speculate. And, you know, what we have is a very different perspective, a different optic, because we live here. So I want to thank you guys for hanging in there tonight. We started a little bit late. I want to thank everybody who was watching. We are live on, we're live on YouTube, Substack, X. We're live on Rumble. And soon when I get back on Facebook, we'll be live on Facebook. And so people can follow us everywhere.
Tell them to, and people, we're live. If people have any questions, let us have your questions, and maybe we could help you out.
Yeah, or any kind of comments because they can do that when we do these shows live. there's a live chat, and we'll try to post most of them and acknowledge them. All right, guys.
Nice
Until
seeing
next
you.
time.
Thanks a lot.
До свидания.